What's up, classmates? This is my presentation on the article Maximizing versus Satisficing Happiness is a Matter of Choice by Schwartz from the year 2002. My name is Hoogsteen, and let's first talk a bit about what the article is actually about. In the article, they try to answer the following question: can people feel worse off as the options they face increase? And they use four different studies, all with their own methods, their own tools to identify a sub-element of the question, and the combined findings of these four, they try to answer the research question. So first, a little bit of background information. The principle of maximizing came from Neumann in the year 1944, and you could compare maximizing really to the principle of economic theory, where you expect people to always maximize the outcomes of their decisions by processing all the information available and getting as much utility as possible. Of course, now we know that's not always the case. Also, Simon thought so. He wrote a bunch of articles starting from 1955 to 1957 about maximizing being unrealistic and unrealizable due to complexity of human environment and limitation of being able to process all the information. And for example, if you have 30 toothbrushes to choose from, you couldn't process all the information available because all the toothbrushes have different features, different pricing, and you couldn't, or it would be really difficult to make the best possible decision from that. Also, Simon came up with the satisficer, and that's another kind of category alongside the maximizer. And the satisficer chooses a product as soon as it exceeds a particular threshold. So when it's good enough, you buy it. That's the thing in short. In 2002, they started experimenting with adding choices and what kind of effect that would have on people's decisions, and they found out that more choices made it harder to get the optimal solution, and more options creates the information problem that you couldn't process all that information. Schwartz, author of this article that I'm going to summarize now, also wrote an article in 2002, and he was describing three problems that people faced when the options would increase. First off, the gain of information, as I mentioned before. The second, standards for acceptance would rise because you have a lot of stuff to choose from, so you would expect yourself to come up with a suiting solution, suiting option. And when people don't find that option, and that's the third thing he found out, and the most interesting, they would blame themselves because there were so many things to choose from and they couldn't come up with a good option, so people would blame themselves. And that's where this article kicks in. It's about the regret that people have about particular decisions, and it uses the categories described by Neumann and Simon, so the maximizers versus the satisficers, and it's looking at the differences between these two categories in terms of regret, in terms of happiness, in measuring how much they maximize and how much the impact is on those particular topics. They used four different studies, as I mentioned. The first one is about the correlations between the maximizing and certain things like regret, happiness, and then they're looking at the differences between the correlations for the maximizer versus the satisficer. The second one is exploring the relationship between maximizing and social comparison. So is a maximizer comparing themselves more to people from the same social status as satisficers. The third study is going a little bit deeper into that topic and really looking at the relationship between maximizers and social comparison when you manipulate this social comparison. So for example, when I would tell you there's somebody from the same social status but he's performing better in life or is performing worse in life, what would that do with you, with your thoughts about yourself, your self-esteem? And they're really trying to measure the difference between the maximizer and the satisficer when you manipulate the social environment like this. The fourth study is using an ultimatum bargaining game and really looking at the regret people have and the influence of the regret on their decisions. The most interesting study of the four for me was the first one, because it was really it had a wide range of topics, a really large sample size, 7 samples, distributing 1747 participants distributed over the 7 samples, and all the different samples had a different questionnaire, and the questionnaire had its own individual content. The topics were the same, but in some questionnaires they left out a lot of the topics, because I think it was of the time issue that they couldn't arrange, for example, 700 people to fill in a questionnaire for 45 minutes, because that was the longest one, lasted for 45 minutes, and it was all the topics mentioned below, and the shortest one was 50 minutes, and it was only 3 of the topics. Finally, they used partial correlation analysis to analyze the data, and some of the data is on this slide. First, some explanation. Behind some of the numbers are stars, and the stars indicate the p-value. So 3 stars means 0.001 p-value or smaller, and 2 stars means 0.01, and 1 star means 0.05, and 0 stars means that the p-value was larger than the 0.05. So the results from those without a star are not really valid compared to the other ones. The most interesting results were, when you look at the first column, you see max, that's for the maximizing scale, and the row regret, you see there's a large correlation between maximization and regret. You see that across all the samples, all with a 3-star p-value. Second off, the correlation between maximization and the happiness scale, that's the SHS, the second one in the row. There's a negative correlation there. So when you maximize, you're getting less happy, and that's also with some logic thought referable to the regret. The third one, the BDI, is the depression indication, and that's positively correlated to the maximization. So in short, when you maximize, you're less happy, you have more regret and more depression. And you see that across all samples. Only the happiness scale is not really valid for the first and the third sample. And when you look at the 5th sample, you see the largest sample size of 752, and there you get a good indication of the 3 I think most important factors, all with a 3-star p-value. So that's a bit of an overview. Then a conclusion. Positive correlation between maximization, regret, perfection, and depression, as I mentioned before. Also negative correlation between maximization, happiness, optimism, satisfaction with life, and self-esteem. Some logic thought would get you to the same conclusions. So it's nice that their research sort of is backing up their hypothesis. The third point is about the second study. Maximizing are more likely to engage in social comparison. So when you maximize, you're more looking around, checking what other people from the same social status are getting, what they're achieving, and you're comparing yourself to them, and therefore feeling less having less self-esteem. And that's also what the third study found. In general, maximizers get better outcomes from decisions, but in doing so, in maximizing, they're more likely to experience these outcomes, these better outcomes, as worse, because they're always looking around trying to get a better solution. And the researchers suggest some further research to examine process differences between maximizers and satisficers when it comes to actual choice behavior. What I think lacked from this research was, if you go back to the first slide, you see that they had the research question about raising the amount of choices, and the whole emphasis in this study was on the relation between maximizers and regret. And they didn't test, or I didn't found a lot of testing with raising the amount of choices and the effect of that on maximizers, on satisficers. So the results from the study were not really that relevant for the research question they put up in the beginning. So there was a bit of a lack of content on that perspective. This was it. This was the summary. I hope I explained it a little bit clear to you. I tried to do it in one go, so sorry if it's not if it's a bit fast paced. But cheers.